Welcome back, family. This is part two of our Heal Talk on social anxiety. And today, we're going even deeper. We're talking about life experiences, identity, biology, all the things that shape how we show up in the world. Because sometimes it's not just anxiety, it's the story behind it. Let's get into it.
Of like really complex mixed life experiences, our biology, our environment, even who we become within our identity too, right? Like it's just a beautiful tapestry of it all. And I think many of us just weren't given permission to slow down enough to acknowledge, like, what is the tapestry of your life that kind of helped form you right in this way, and to learn to understand yourself enough to know and learn how you can then kind of start putting some buffers in place to challenge a little bit of that narrative that the itty bitty committee tries to create, right, in our mind's eye, that disables our ability to then counter and create a different trend for ourselves.
Right? Or we really hold on to the narratives that other people have scribed for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm. See, that's Heal Talk right there, what you just said there. Thank you for breaking down the social anxiety, right? Because I think a lot of times what I'll hear is someone speak of a certain thing that they're going through within their anxiety, but they're maybe like putting it in the wrong space. They might put it over here, like it's not social anxiety, right, Mr. Adam? It's over here, right? And they're kind of and everything, all the signs are telling me that sounds like social anxiety, right? So I appreciate the breakdown of that because I started reflecting as you were talking about it and thinking of my childhood and these conversations just weren't happening.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's wasn't talking to me about anxiety at all. Anxiety wasn't even a word in our house, right? It just didn't exist. Like, I don't know if the timing, the situations, circumstances, trials, tribulations, life, whatever it may be, maybe vocabulary a little bit, just like it just wasn't in the realm. But I know, um, I want to say around sixth grade to eighth grade, I was facing some social anxiety. And the way I was combating it was by pushing myself more forward out there. Meaning at that time, dancing was big in Chicago. You know that day. It was just huge, right? Like every neighborhood had a dance group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of at least several of them. And my thing was like, I had the biggest anxiety because I see everybody dance back in the day. When you dance, the whole everybody circled around you, right? And it was like, look at me, very much. And I had a lot of anxiety about that. And I pushed myself to do it. And then it turned. That social anxiety became it wasn't social anxiety no more. I was enjoying it. I like embraced it, right? It was like this, I felt like I got baptized by something. Like it was like this new life, right? Because now not only was I able to let go of that social anxiety that anxiety that I was feeling at that moment, but I also was able to embrace this new power in me to let this creative spirit out, right?
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
and it was really my brain just working this whole vicious circle, right? And I know you say itty bitty committee. I call it the little guy in the back of my warehouse. He was putting the wrong files in the drawers, right?
Yeah.
It was just this. It was this situation, but I didn't have anybody to talk to me about that.
Yeah.
Not even
I mean,
mentors who were amazing.
I think that goes back to Rosina when you said permission. Like we didn't have permission to do any of that. It was just on to the next one, right? And then our parents didn't have permission to do anything except make sure that we had what we needed.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it too is as the generations go on, there's more and more permission to kind of see like what is their authentic self and what do they need in order to be able to exist in some of those spaces, right? So to go to work, to go to school, to go to family dinners, right, where that fear of judgment and performance can really feel heavy.
Yeah, and you said something when you were talking about like you be doing the dancing, Adam. Like, when people are in, whether it's flow or they're feeling like they're in their subject matter expert, right? right? That kind of disables anxiety, right? Because now they're kind of, you're the master of your universe, right? Like you know how to do these things. And of course, right? Like there's no anxieties because who's going to tell you you're not doing the move right? Not this person, because shoot, you watching me with my moves, right? So, right, you were the subject matter expert. So that kind of like it quiets the little itty bitty committee of our mind. But then when we go back to like what created it in the first place, right? We've all been kind of talking about it, but like those chaotic, unsafe, highly judgmental environments, right? Those are the things that trained the system, right? That it needed to stay on alert in social environments, right? Those are the places that said, in this environment, you speaking up or you doing something right, it's not okay, right? Because you're supposed to be this way, and that's what the little itty bitty committee's trying to do. But when you're in flow and you're mastering that and you're feeling really confident, it doesn't have the ability to enter in because it's
Mm-hmm.
already feeling a confidence, it's already
Yeah.
feeling like it's mastering that environment. And so you don't have
Yeah.
to feel like you need to protect yourself or save face or not engage, because you're already like you're it in that moment. And I love that you use that example because
Mhm.
like that's precisely what I think many of us do to like overcome it, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
dancing, whether it's art, whether it's sport, right? We ended up engaging in a lot of these different behaviors and doing these things because we all
Yeah.
needed something to save us, right?
Hmm. And
Like it's
I didn't have
all.
the permission. I didn't have the permission. I didn't have the people resources who had the knowledge, right? But I
Mhm.
had a mean ass running man. And my running man knocked a lot of that anxiety out of me. I'm telling you, the more I did it, the more parties I went to and did it, the more that anxiety was just like, young running man's just too damn good, right? I joke, but I really do mean that. I think the more you're right, the more I perfected that skill, and obviously felt confident enough to just do it in front of everybody and their mama, because
Mhm.
it really was that people would circle around. It really instilled in me in that moment that not instilled, it really just removed whatever
Mhm.
that voice, that file that went in the wrong drawer, whatever that was gone, right? And obviously there was other things that came out after that, but that was an example that I used because I felt like and this goes to the next thing I wanted to ask y'all, but for this one, it showed up for me at the right time for me to combat it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But the question I want to ask you is that obviously it comes up at different times, right? And sometimes in the worst times, right? It could be work meetings, group settings, right? Things like that. And we kind of touched on that a little here and there. We want to expand on it. Love to hear it, but what are the thoughts on that in terms of how it's showing up in certain spaces?
Yeah, as we were talking about it, I think, when it comes to being in those spaces, it's like our perception of like those expectations going into those different environments, right? It's us not fully understanding the power dynamics, right, that are at play. And because we don't, right, then we enter like in our mind like that risk and that fear of judgment and rejection, right, which is kind of the intersecting kind of cornerstone of where anxiety lives. And whether it's showing up like, oh my gosh, somebody's watching me, or they're measuring me up against, or they're comparing me, or we start comparing ourselves, right? And as we do that, like it starts intensifying even just our own unspoken, right? Pressure to perform, right? We've got to be doing the right thing. And in our mind, as it's building up, it turns into this little pressure cooker. And this pressure cooker is creating like these really high stakes within a situation that honestly really don't exist because nobody else is feeling that the stakes are so high. But that's where social anxiety takes you. It's like an all or nothing, like your reputation is on the line, your credibility, or if you don't stay in the vein where you are accepted, or in your mind feeling like you are accepted, then you're putting yourself in this space where now you are being othered, right? And that is a very like, as like individuals who need that human to human interaction, to put ourselves in a space where we feel like we're othered, right? That's almost like ostracizing yourself. It's almost like just putting yourself on an island and just casting yourself away. And then when you add that to like this history of being silenced or shamed or dismissed, which also comes right from childhood, right? Children are seen, not heard. You don't talk back. You don't get the ability to say these things back, right? That's where those people pleasing behaviors start showing up, right? Because now I can't say anything, so I just need to do more. Right. And I just got to do this, or sorry, right? Like I didn't want you to do these things. Being talked over, minimized, criticized, right? These really create like very like physical somatic reactions in people when they haven't had the opportunity to learn how to overcome them.
Yeah.
And I think it happens in many, like for those of it, like I think us BIPOC folks, because we all grew up pretty collectivistically, like in our families as big units, it shows up a lot there where voicing our emotions, how we felt about things, it wasn't made to feel safe. And we didn't even have permission. Like it was completely discouraged. You talk back, you get a fat lip, right? Like it was just like that. And so, like, power dynamics and identity and just who we were coming to be, it was, yeah, there are so many layers. Like, I feel like that one I could just like kind of pull apart a little bit, but I'm gonna bring it in because it's it becomes a survival in our system to know that like when we're not safe, right, and our mind is going, then we like shut it all down. We shut it all down because we're waiting for the environment to give us a permission to tell us that it's okay, but we're also not putting like and shooting out that lifesaver that says, hey, I need somebody to tell me I'm good. And nobody's giving it to us because we're not really giving them anything. So we stay trapped. And we stay trapped like in our mind's eye in an environment where we're just not safe and we're not being affirmed. And so yeah, it can really put people in spaces in really dark spaces. And that's where social anxiety can then like highlight because I think sometimes it even occurs. I'm thinking about a person I worked with, one of my vets, right? Like it definitely like turned and brought up some of their even PTSD symptoms, right? Because it evolved out of some of like their complex traumas that they've experienced, right? And it just wasn't one, it was like myriad of different things that happen. And so their ability to be in spaces that just aren't safe, and we use that word a lot, but safety has a whole lot to do with it, like safe to contribute, and that's a psychological safety, right? Like in our mind, do we have the ability to contribute, to be a part of, to engage, to experience, without that fear of judgment or somebody holding us back or down. And that doesn't often exist, right? In a person's mind who is experiencing that social anxiety, they don't feel that it exists anywhere for them.
Yeah, I see it. Yes, I see it as to having to hide parts of ourselves, right? So we can't really show up in those spaces authentically because of that fear of being judged and that fear of not being enough, right? So I think about like the shrinking violet in the corner who, their whole life has been told not to speak. This is an adult conversation and all this stuff. So I'm just going to sit in the corner and just take up this little space here. And, or in the work, in the group project, right, where they might be thinking that, oh, somebody already said something, so they took the one idea I had, so now people are going to think I didn't prepare for this, right? So and that internal dialogue starts happening, right? So it really is about that performance piece and that fear of being judged, and really like giving ourselves the ability to see that if we are able to apply something, and I'm thinking about you, Adam, with your dancing, right? If you're able to apply it there, that's a strength, and we can learn how to apply it in other spaces too. So we can learn how to apply it at work, how to apply it with our family, right? So it's something that we can take and kind of broad, start to broad stroke it and see like what happens when it starts to exist in other areas. Like what does our sense of safety feel like? What does our brain want to protect us from? Because it thinks it's protecting us, but it's really, really holding us down, and it's not intentional. But in the moment, it feels like that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. And just one thing, like as you said that, Daisy, something came to my mind, right? You know, as we're thinking about like, right, our itty bitty committee will get going and is trying to tell us, right? Like anxiety itself isn't always a bad thing either, right? Like it's it's a trigger that's saying, hey, and this is your nervous system saying, hey, something's happening to you, and I need to be able to intervene here because I want to be able to protect you from the harm that you've experienced before. And so it hasn't been given the appropriate filters or the appropriate tools to know, like, hey, like you're good, you're okay, you can navigate this, right? So it gets a little overactive. And so part of like the work to overcoming it is also recognizing that when you can show up as your full and authentic self and you give yourself that permission, which I think in many ways comes through self compassion, right? You learn to not, have to hide behind facades, but you can be your full self and not just always this version of you that's this protected self, right? Because that's where the anxiety is, right? Like the anxiety is like, oh, something's happening, you got to protect. But you don't always have to protect yourself because there's not always a threat. But
Yeah.
we don't learn the trigger and we don't learn the filter of the difference, and that's kind of the work of like helping your system to understand, like, woo woo, right? Like you're okay, it's all right, you don't have to stress out, like this is good. It's a little, you might have had a little challenge, but it comes with skill building, right? And that's, I love that you use dancing, right? Like as you got better and you started showing your moves, right, then nobody could tell you nothing. And so you naturally just started like, hey, this is my authentic self. Can't nobody tell me nothing. I'm being hyped up. You're running mad, right? Like all the things. And so you didn't have to show up as your protected self anymore, right? Because you had given yourself that permission to be just your full self in that situation.
Yeah. So Adam, when you said the file folders, right? I'm picturing
Yeah,
Inside
yeah.
Out. I'm picturing
Yep.
the movie Inside Out, and
Yep.
how,
Yep.
you know, a trigger is happening and someone is in your brain saying, wait, wait, I remember this, right? And they're freaking
Uh-huh.
out trying to find that memory, and your brain doesn't give you a chance to create a new one, right? So
Mm.
it wants to default to that memory that you had from a while ago, and it doesn't really give you a chance to experience something different.
Mm. See,
Mhm.
y'all keep dropping gems, and it makes me think of so many different things. Like I am really the things that y'all saying is making me reflect backward a little bit. And because I ran camp for so many years, I had a variety of children that came through the camp, and some were extroverts and were singing every camp song, was at the front of every line, and some wanted to do that but stood at the back of every line and was the last to get into the dining hall, was the last to get to the activity. And I think about how beautiful camp was for that space and just the environment of camp, I guess is where I'm saying. The environment, the people, and the support that those campers received. Because it just makes me think of that. It also makes me think of like different family members who are like really quiet, like supremely quiet and got judged for it.
Mhm.
And they were the same family members who didn't like want to come to the party. My auntie like dragged them in, like, and that's because they probably were facing some social anxiety, and we didn't have the resources to tell my cousin that, like, cousin, you going through some social anxiety, right? Like, it makes me think of all that, and just kind of like, one, appreciative for the advancement of information, because then, as you get information, you get better and you do better, right? And why I say that is, like, I have three children, right? And I want to make sure that I have these healthy conversations. So, like, I want to say a month ago with my 14-year-old, I had a conversation about anxiety with him, right? Like, and while I was having this conversation, being a fatherless child, I was like, why don't I have a father to even have that conversation? Right. And
Mhm.
mom's just was too busy to have that conversation. So it's like, one full circle of like what I didn't have is what I'm going to give and right to my children and kind of like end that cycle per se of lack of conversations. So I'm really stuck on that one. So I'll get off of it now. But that one really, after this conversation, I might have to reflect a little more on it. But I guess towards folks who are going through it, right, who are managing it, and I think Rossina, you said earlier, some folks are managing it. Some people just manage it, right? They get through it. I managed it like I shared. I combated it with just kind of stepping out. And then Daisy, you said something about the transfer of that, how I did that here, and you could transfer it to here. And you're so right. Because right when I stopped dancing, because there was just you couldn't I wasn't gonna dance for 20 years, right? I was just like, all right, dancing's over. It turned into rapping.
Mhm.
It was still doing the same thing, right? I was still feeding the crowd, right? I was still but it was a transfer, rhythm, energy, all that other stuff. But it continued because at first, when I started rhyming, I didn't have the confidence, right? So it's just one of those things. And I wanted to point that out because I feel like it almost leans to what I'm going to ask you next, which is like folks who are going through it, right? I put in a little chat there for you as well, real quick. This is the last one, y'all. Last one. For the folks who are listening to us, picking out this segment and these beautiful gems from Ms. Daisy and Rossina. What are some gentle tips, some tips that we could provide? I know we said a lot of them. I mentioned one right there with the combating, but if there's anything else you want to kind of put a stamp on for this Heel Talk segment around social anxiety, the floor is yours. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about knowing what works for you in those moments. So when I think about skills and coping skills is a word that us therapists like to include in the batter of the mix that we do, right? And we have to really look at what that means. So I encourage people to make sure that they're breathing, because sometimes in those situations you forget to breathe, and it's those deep breaths that help our brain like recognize what Rosina was saying earlier about like, wait, I'm actually, I think I'm okay, right? And it like helps regulate our heart rate, right? All those things, all those physical symptoms that start to happen with social anxiety can start to reduce just by breathing, right? So we kind of forget that sometimes. I think when people are in the moment too and their thoughts start to drift, I like them to focus on something. So, what is something they can focus on? Even if it's something like starting to count backwards, right? I don't do counting backwards by ones or twos. I think that's too easy. The muscle memory can pick it up too quick. But let's count back by threes, because at some point your brain's going to have to focus on that a little bit more, because the subtraction is not as easy. So really thinking about that, and like how can you surround yourself with people who you can be authentic with, right? So sometimes having anxiety and social anxiety is examining your circle and seeing like who is a support for me, who can I be myself with, who can I like honestly say, you know what, I'm just gonna go take a break real quick, right? And have that be fully accepted and non-judgmental. There's a lot of things that I could say really about that, but I'll tag in Rosina.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. And I think when we, to build a little bit on that, and just kind of what we've been talking about, it's like overcoming and just kind of being present to like what your social anxiety is and healing it. It doesn't start with just like simply putting yourself out there, right? Like don't just get out there and go do something, because that could create a lot more and it could actually be quite traumatic. It's all meaningful shifts that, and I think this is the cornerstone of it. Like these meaningful shifts build safety like inside your own body. And that's really what you're combating. You're combating this idea of like what feels safe in your body, and where your body's like red alert and it's trying to send off the 4 alarm, fire signal, right? Because it's thinking it needs to protect. Well, when you start building that sense of safety like inside your body, then it can start happening in your environment and within your relationships, right? And so it has to start here first. And getting, like Daisy was saying, that mindfulness, we say mindful and not mindless, right? You got to be in your mind and full of like what's happening here, and not just mindless on autopilot doing things out in the world. Pay attention to what's happening with your all-star player, right? Like be right here. Practice self-compassion over self-correction, right? When you can be kinder to yourself and not judge and correct yourself, right? You give yourself the opportunity to be there. It changes the I sounded dumb, or I'm weird, or that was stupid, to like, oh dang, I realized that was hard. And you know what? I'm doing my very best, right? I know I was nervous, but I'm gonna show up anyways. And I think that's okay, right? Like it's really changing that language. Try low risk things. You don't have to go out there and do the hardest thing ever, right? Start small, like just say hi and make eye contact with the barista at Starbucks, right? It could start that small. And just seeing, how did you feel? Like, were you really anxious? Or did you want to run away? Did your skin crawl? Like what happened, right? And it's just like with anything, it's all muscle memory. So you can create a social muscle memory by building these little practical things where you can find that command and that mastery over, so that you can do that. And I think like preparing, right, some of your own gentle scripts to help you combat the little itty bitty committee of your life, so you can really counter the narrative that it's trying to tell you, right? When you can have your set scripts, whether write it on a 3x5 card, put it on a little note in your phone, but have something that you can look at that helps you combat what this little itty bitty committee is trying to say. Because it's got the worst things, the most negative things that have ever done. It's on its greatest hits, and it is ready to hit play at any given moment. So if you have your own scripts prepared, it makes it a lot easier to give yourself a fighting chance to overcome it. And let your people know, right? We all need our battle buddy. We need that friend that create those healing and meaningful spaces for us. So giving yourself that chance to find an affirming space where you don't have to be the one that holds it all for yourself, but you can lean in and tap into someone else, because we all need somebody.
And that's Heal Talk. See how simple that was? That was Heal Talk, y'all. And I appreciate y'all. I appreciate everything you shared today. It was a lot of gems today, a lot of reflection. And I hope that the great part of doing these segments that I get the benefit of editing. And it's not really a benefit because the editing is long, but it's a benefit because you get to listen to these gems over and over. And I'm like, man, things that I might have like thought I heard, but you listen to it again and you're like, wow, I missed that piece. And it was such a connected piece to the thought that I really needed. Right. So one, thank y'all. Gratitude to both of y'all. Can't clap as well. I haven't done one of those for a while. And I just appreciate y'all. This Heal Talk segment is all about Heal Talk conversations, healing, talking, bringing it together and creating Heal Talk. And we had two individuals today who brought the business. And I hope that as you take in these segments, this conversation, and if you're facing some of this, right, you're managing some of this, take some of these gems in, take some of this advice in, because you can do it. You can get past it, right? And I think part of that, as you go on through your week and you take in this segment, my last words for you are, who's helping you heal, y'all? Peace.